Summary of the Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers. In part 1 of the book, Carson McCullers presents 5 people, all of whom live in an unnamed mill town in the deep south and are deeply lonely in their own ways. It is the year 1938. John Singer is deaf and mute. He recently broke up with his friend of 10 years, Spiros Antonopoulos, who is also deaf and mute. Antonopoulos was put in a crazy hospital by his cousin Charlie Parker because he was always getting into fights. Singer is sad about being alone in a town where no one really gets him. He moves into a place run by the Kelly family and starts going to the New York Cafe, which is open all night. The owner of the cafe, Biff Brannon, is stuck in an unhappy marriage to a woman named Alice. Brannon is kind to strangers, freaks, and people who don't fit in. He angers Alice when he lets Jake Blunt, a rude, drunk traveler, stay at the cafe and drink on credit for 12 days. Brannon is bothered by Blunt's extreme political views and his violent behavior when he's drunk, but he and Singer work together to feed, dress, and house the obviously sick visitor. Mick Kelly, a girl who is 13 years old and whose parents run a boarding house in town, is always lonely and boring. Mick is the middle child of a family of 6. She wants to be a great songwriter and pianist, and she is always making up music in her head. Mick is very interested in John Singer and often goes to his room upstairs to see him. Jake Blunt, meanwhile, gets a job as a carousel operator at the Sunny Dixie Show, which is an outdoor show. Blunt is a dedicated leftist who wants nothing more than to travel through the South and tell the workers he meets about the bad things about capitalism. Blunt, on the other hand, can't even stay clean long enough to get through the day, let alone start a revolution. Dr. Benedict Mady Copeland is a black doctor who idolizes the works of Baruch Spinoza and Karl Marx. He is a lonely man who dreams of getting his people to start a revolution. When Copeland's daughter Portia, who works in the kitchen of the Kelly boarding house, comes to see him, Copeland's great fight becomes clear. He wants to get people in his town to avoid jobs where they have to serve white people, to fight back against racism and unfairness in their town, and to be proud of who they are and what they've been through. Copeland thinks that Portia is lazy. Copeland wants better for Portia, even though she says she loves her job, the children of her boss, and her life with her husband, Highboy, and her brother, Willie. During their talk, it becomes clear that Portia is the only link between Copeland and the rest of his separated family, but he keeps putting her patience to the test by starting fights with her over her political beliefs. At the end of the night, Willie and Highboy have a short talk with Copeland after they come to get Portia. Then, they leave him alone with his books. He thinks about the deaf man who lit his cigarette for him in the rain one night. This was the first good white person he's ever met. As the weeks go by, Mick, Brannon, Blunt, and Copeland come to visit Singer at the boarding house, and Singer lets them stay in his room. Singer is pleased and touched by what they say and think, but he can't really connect with any of them because he can't say anything back. He goes to see Antonopoulos at the hospital, but his friend is closed off and different. As the seasons change in part 2, the lives, hopes, dreams, and traumas of each of the major characters become entwined. In early fall, Mick throws a prom party for her new high school friends. At the party, she sees her next-door neighbor Harry Minowitz, a Jewish boy whose strong dislike of fascism fascinates Mick. Mick likes feeling fancy and grown-up at the party, but at the end of the night, she puts on her old shorts and goes for a late-night walk around the neighborhood to listen for the sounds of other people's radios. Alice, Biff's wife, dies quickly. His sister-in-law Lucille Wilson and his niece Baby Wilson are the only ones who can support him. After a fight at a dance hall, Willie Copeland is charged with attack and sent to the state prison. Copeland goes to a family gathering held by his late wife's father, whom his children call Grandpapa, and meets up with his boys Karl Marx, who is embarrassed by his name and goes by Buddy, and Hamilton, who he hasn't seen in a long time. Blunt wishes he could get the message of socialism out to the whole town. When he meets Sims, a traveling preacher who writes Bible lines and religious messages on the walls of local buildings and businesses, he gets an idea of how to do this. Later, Mick's younger brother Bubber makes their already bad financial situation even worse when he accidentally kills baby Wilson with the gun that his friend Spareribs gave him. Lucille wants the family to pay back the hospital bills for baby. When Bubber tries to run away to Atlanta, his family finds him and brings him back home. After what happened, Bubber is sad and quiet, and he only wants to be called by his real name, George. On Christmas Day, Copeland has a party at his house and tells everyone that Lancey Davis won a writing contest about how to improve the status of the black race in society. At the party, Copeland makes a rousing speech to his many guests, trying to get them to live by the generous, community-focused values of Marxism and to fight against the hard jobs that keep them in the service of their white oppressors. Even though the message is met with loud cheers, Copeland is still not sure if he has really reached his people. Singer goes to see Antonopoulos at the hospital, where he learns that his friend has been moved to the infirmary because of nephritis. Singer brings Antonopoulos food and presents, but Antonopoulos is still as cold and uninterested as ever. Brannon keeps thinking about how much he misses his wife. His grief keeps him so busy that he doesn't notice that the cafe keeps losing money. He wants to love someone and raise a child, and he soon becomes obsessed with Mick Kelly and, to a lesser extent, with Baby, who is sick. As Mick and Harry get closer, her interest in Singer grows, and she fights to write down the songs that keep playing in her head. One cold February morning, during an attack of pneumonia that makes Copeland's latent tuberculosis worse, Portia brings Copeland bad news. A young man named Buster Johnson just got out of prison and told a terrible story about how he was treated there. Buster and Willie were beaten by white jail guards for months. As a result, Buster lost one leg and Willie lost both feet. Copeland is angry, so he goes to the courthouse to talk to the local judge. However, a group of white cops beat him up and put him in jail for the night. As the cold ends and March gets cooler, Mick and Harry go on a walk to take their minds off their sadness and worry about Willie Copeland being tortured and the Nazis taking over more and more of Europe. They have sex by a creek in a quiet forest. Harry asks Mick to marry him, but Mick says she doesn't want to get married. Harry then runs away from home, telling Mick that he'll send her a letter in 2 months to let her know she's all right. Mick knows that she is now an adult, whether she likes it or not. Jake Blunt finds out that Willie is back from jail, so he goes to Copeland's house to see the boy and ask him to tell his story all over town in order to get people to fight against the racist, capitalist status quo. During a conversation with Copeland, however, a drunk and angry Blunt can't agree with the doctor's view that racism, not business, is the bigger problem. When they insult each other, Copeland, who is sick, has a fit, and Jake runs away out of fear. During the summer, Mick's sister Hazel tells him that there is a job opening at Woolworth's. Mick's parents tell her not to take the job and to stay in school, but when Mick hears how much the job pays, she chooses to go in for an interview because the money will help her family. Mick runs to Singer's room the morning of the interview and asks him if taking the job is a good idea. Singer, confused, nods in answer. Mick takes her to Woolworth's, and they hire her right away. Singer chooses to go back to Antonopoulos after not being able to understand what people are saying to him for a few weeks. This has been bothering him, especially when Mick asked him quickly about the job at Woolworth's. But after a 12-hour train ride, when he gets to the hospital, he is told that Antonopoulos is dead. Singer walks around the town where the hospital is and meets 3 deaf and dumb men, but he can't connect with them because he's still upset about Antonopoulos' death. Singer takes the train back to the mill town. He gets a gun from the jewelry shop where he works, takes it to his room at the boarding house, and kills himself. Part 3 of the book takes place on August 21, 1939, which is a few weeks after Singer's death. McCullers shows where the 4 main characters, who were all hurt by Singer's death, have ended up. Copeland is being moved against his will to Grandpapa's farm so he can get better. Blunt barely gets away from a deadly race fight in sunny Dixie, during which Lancey Davis is killed. The papers say that the riot was caused by labor agitation. Blunt leaves town because he knows he will soon be on the wanted list for his part in the riot. He doesn't know where he's going, but he's determined to stay in the South. Mick is always tired, both physically and mentally, because her job at Woolworths is boring but hard on her emotionally. As she eats a sundae and drinks a beer at the New York cafe, she regrets taking the job and wonders if she'll ever be able to go back to the inside room of quiet in her mind and write music again, or if all her years of thinking have been for nothing. Brannon stands alone at the cash register at the end of a long, empty night at the cafe. He wonders what made Singer kill himself. He stews in his loneliness and wishes he had someone he could love. Brannon thinks for a moment that he understands what it means to be lonely, to fight, and to be brave, but the moment passes as quickly as it came, and Biff is left alone to wait for dawn.
About the author. Carson McCullers was born in Georgia in 1917. She showed artistic promise from a young age, even though her tomboyish style, introverted personality, and several bouts of rheumatic fever made her stand out from many of her peers. McCullers worked hard at the piano and practiced for several hours every day. Her watchmaker father told her to start writing stories, which she did. McCullers went to New York City when she was 17 to study piano at Juilliard. When she ran into financial trouble in the city, she worked strange jobs and took writing classes to make ends meet. After she got rheumatic fever again, McCullers began to split her time between New York and Columbus, Ohio. When she married Reeves McCullers in 1937, they moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, where they lived for a few years before getting a divorce in 1941. McCullers then went back to New York, where she moved in trendy literary circles, joined the artists gathering February House, and made ties that helped her move to Paris after World War II ended. McCullers dated a number of women and often dressed in men's clothes, but she remarried Reeves McCullers in 1945, even though he had relationships with other men while they were married. In 1953, Reeves McCullers killed himself in Paris. After that, McCullers moved to upstate New York. Even though she had a series of strokes that left her mostly paralyzed by the time she was 31, McCullers continued to write a lot. Her books The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, The Member of the Wedding, and Reflections in a Golden Eye all deal with themes of isolation, extreme politics, and the fight to live a good, kind life. Her work has been turned into many plays and movies, and both her books and short stories are often used as samples of Southern Gothic writing.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.